I have the honor of moderating and introducing these speakers. We have a range of topics. Now, the idea for Flash Talks is these are short, 10 minutes Flash Talks. As it says, the order that we are running in is slightly different to what you see. I'll be introducing people one by one, but we are going straight off. Our presenters are here. We haven't heard anything from Carmen, so there will be 6 talks. After those 6 talks, I will invite all the speakers back here and we'll have questions, okay? And we are running to time. So without further ado, I would like to invite here Belle Streeton and Daniel Swift from Concrete Youth. Over to you guys.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be speaking about our research into autonomous sensory meridian response, or ASMR, and its impact on audiences labelled with profound and multiple learning disabilities, and our application of it into sensory theatre.
Hi, I'm Belle Streeton. I am a white woman with long auburn hair wearing a pink jumpsuit, and I'm the co-artistic director of the charity with Concrete Youth. And my main role at Concrete Youth is in the touring side, developing the artistic visions and coming up with the creative concepts.
And I'm Daniel Swift. I'm the CEO and co-artistic director of Concrete Youth. I'm a white male with brown hair wearing a blue and white patterned shirt and blue trousers. And I support Belle with the artistic programme, whilst also overseeing the daily operations of the charity, strategy, business management, and all that lovely stuff.
So Concrete Youth, we are a charity that champions cultural provision for audiences with profound and multiple learning disabilities, otherwise known as PMLD. And through this, we have 2 arms of the charity, one being the education arm and one being the touring and production arm. So we're going to be focusing on this today.
Could we have the next slide, please? Our audiences labelled with profound and multiple learning disabilities have more than one disability, the most significant of which is a profound learning disability. They may also have many other conditions such as cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, and Rett syndrome. We make accessible theatre to create inclusive experiences for audiences with PMLD who cannot access mainstream theatre productions.
So the way we structure this in the production, we have a sensory moment where an audience member will explore an object that relates to one of their senses that entirely relates to the narrative of the story as well. We heavily rely on music. A lot of our shows previously have been musical, and we also try and make things as non-verbal as possible with the staging. But when we do use verbal communication, we use the universal sign language aid, which is Makaton.
And for those who aren't aware, ASMR, or autonomous sensory meridian response, is a response triggered by certain stimuli that causes brain and spine tingles, and that includes tapping, speaking, whispering, and slow hand movements. Could we have the first video, please?
So with ASMR, I first found it at the age of 14, and it was a crazy kind of like internet
There we go, Belle, sorry.
To my hair salon. I'm going to be taking care of you. Is this the first time in my salon? Okay.
And could we go back to the next slide, please?
I promise that I will be careful.
So from our research with ASMR scientist Dr. Craig Richards, he theorised that this response is impacted by mother ease, the sing-song speech that we experience as an infant.
For ASMR can be described as attention-induced euphoria, which led to us to begin to draw comparisons with this in sensory play, alongside the use of narrative in ASMR. We couldn't believe that so many members of our audience had never used ASMR as a sensory experience.
Which leads us on to our first project. In September 2020, 50 people with PMLD were sent audio samples of ASMR triggers. So most responses were very positive. Some had no reaction, but there were no negative responses whatsoever to the stimuli.
And could we have the next video, please?
I would like to some so yummy juice or be more.
And if we could go to the next slide, please. So that was Emma and her child there, and Emma did actually mention that her child doesn't usually visually respond to auditory stimuli in such a way, so for him to smile and actively engage in such a way was incredibly impactful for her. The second stage of our project took place in 2021 and engaged 750 people labelled with profound and multiple learning disabilities. They were sent research packs containing ASMR stimuli. They listened to the stimuli on 3 occasions to ensure that there were genuine and spontaneous responses. Carers were encouraged to record responses so we could visually document those, but written feedback was also accepted.
The project consisted of actors, dramaturgs, academics, musicians, sound designers, wellbeing experts, puppet specialists, sound and voice practitioners, an ASMR scientist, and 750 people with PMLD. These individuals spanned across from the UK, US, and Singapore.
So the project was also underpinned by an audited ethics procedure that stated methods in which carers can ensure consent from their non-verbal participants. Could we have the next slide, please? There we go, that one, right there. Once the results were received, the artists and academics joined us to explore them. We brought in surround sound systems to explore different methods of ASMR, sensory play, and live Foley. This formed the early versions of a new sensory theatre production combining ASMR, live Foley, sensory puppets, and sensory play.
This culminated in a work in progress sharing of our experiments in the rehearsal room with the 750 people with PMLD. This was online via Zoom. We had a post-sharing feedback session via this, and the theme of the sharing was ASMR in the jungle, as most sensory stories were always originated from nature, so we took that as inspiration. So the sharing being in a digital format was similar or the same approach to most ASMR videos. The responses were extremely informative. However, due to COVID at the time, we couldn't trial out the ASMR techniques in person. But due to the positive results from the sharing, we decided to go ahead and create an ASMR multisensory show anyway. However, we combated this by inviting the service users of a charity called Danny's Dream to make sure that this was still effective and also exciting in person.
From our research, we learned of misophonia, mentioned earlier as a negative response to sound. However, ASMR creates relaxing responses to those who experience it. The excitement for when we hear something beautiful, such as beautiful music, is called frisson.
So that in the Whispering Jungle, we combined frisson with ASMR techniques to give gentle encouragement to the relaxed state of the audience to a focused one. And here is a short trailer of the show.
Could we have the third and final video, please? Could we go back to the next slide, please? The Whispering Jungle premiered in a pilot tour to 4 venues in 2022. The production follows the turtle, the monkey, and the bird as their home is destroyed due to deforestation. The show explores themes of family, friendship, mental health, and togetherness.
With any action that was on stage, another cast member would perform live Foley to match the movement on stage from the puppet, and all the narration was pre-recorded and whispered, which reflected the kind of experience that we had with the ASMR videos.
Other areas of the production combined recorded sound and live Foley, paying homage to the recorded nature of online ASMR. During sensory engagement periods of the production, actors would perform ASMR into a microphone and directly to audiences to provide various different experiences of ASMR to them.
So The Whispering Jungle enjoyed sellout audiences, 5-star reviews, and exceptional audience feedback. The production will be revived on a major national tour in October and November 2023.
Could we have the final slide, please? We regularly receive emails from schools, carers, and care settings telling us how they use ASMR on a daily basis due to our research, The Whispering Jungle, and our published findings.
So we'll continue to champion our audience, ASMR, and continue to search for new, enriching, and exciting sensory experience in support of our audience's ongoing sensory journeys.
Our contact details are behind us. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you very much, Belle. Were exactly on time, and I would like now to invite Eimer Murphy to talk about Accidental Archive, the prop stores of the Abbey Theatre Dublin, National Theatre of Ireland. Eimer.
Okay, I have a lot of slides. Well, that's me. So, figure out how this works. Good afternoon. My name is Eimer Murphy. I am the prop master at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. I am a member of the Irish Society for Theatre Research. I am also a member of the Irish Society of Performance Designers, who brought me to Prague, and I have a master's degree in material culture design history from the National College of Art and Design. I list all of these credentials to give a sense of legitimacy to my subject, because as ubiquitous as they are, there are props, after all, in almost every film, television, and theatre production. The role and contribution of props is rarely acknowledged and little understood. Prop stores tend to elicit two very different and equally strong responses in people. The first one is of delight. People claim that they are like a treasure trove or a gold mine. To others, it's their worst nightmare. That's one of our prop stores right there. People say regularly in my hearing that they are just full of rubbish or it's a load of old junk, and they invariably call me a hoarder. This reflects a disrespectful attitude to objects in general, but props in particular, and belies the fact that stage objects are as old as theatre itself and form part of its foundational language. As these objects have helped to tell our stories for so long, today I would like to tell you some of theirs. Their object biographies intersect with the life stories of people who have worked at the Abbey Theatre. The Abbey, uniquely, is the only dedicated and full-time prop department in Irish theatre, which is quite an extraordinary thing to say. And we have the largest collection of props. This wonderful document is one of my favorite things. It's the official job description of my legendary predecessor. His name was Mr. Stephen Malloy. Stephen had the distinction of being Ireland's longest-serving prop master. He held the title for 42 years before he retired in 2019. He collected in his book, The Stage Life of Props, Andrew Sofer has described theatre as, quote, a vast self-reflexive recycling project, which is a particularly accurate description in the case of the Abbey as Ireland's national theatre. Plays such as Sean O'Casey's Birth of the Nation play, The Plough and the Stars, were played in a repertory schedule which saw the original props and costumes stored and reused for decades until fire broke out in 1951. The building was burned down. The Abbey Company was called to save what they could. They piled important things outside on the street in the frantic race to save what were the important things. There are stories of people who went into the script room and threw scripts and documents still smoldering out of the windows. This is one such example. This is, it's actually a prop list from a 1937 play written by Lady Gregory called Sancho's Master. And when these documents, when you open the archive boxes, you can still smell the smoke on them. So this document, is, along with many others, is looked after by our archivist Mairead Delaney in the Abbey Theatre. The Irish Times report of the following day just had this little tidbit. It said, quote, among the blackened rafters in the scene dock at the back of the theatre, Bill Foley, who plays Captain Brennan in the production of Plough and the Stars, saw his makeup box. It had survived the flames, and inside it he found grease paint which had not melted. In the scramble and the subsequent haphazard storage of everything that related to the old Abbey Theatre, furniture, artwork, documents, and props were all mixed up together. And with time, the provenance of many objects was lost. Many things are stored with and used as props, making the prop stores an accidental archive of Abbey artifacts. Whoops. This is one of my favorite quotes, very overtime. Rick Noble's, author of Reading the Material Theatre, acknowledges that theatre practice has always and inevitably dealt with stuff in all of its messiness. It engages with the thingness of the material world in ways that few other art practices do. Knowles adds that the theatre also generates things in abundance, which is a knowing reference to the sheer amount of things prescribed by playwrights within the text of every single script. When I was interviewing some Irish playwrights for my thesis, playwright Frank McGuinness said, "My feeling is that you never realize how much stuff there is in a single text. It always comes as a complete shock when you see the sheer size and scale of the demands that you're making," which is no surprise to much of us. Let's be honest. It is little wonder then that prop rooms contain such a bewildering variety of objects. These are just slides from our prop rooms. In any other context, they would defy categorization. However, in the Abbey Theatre, they're instantly recognizable and their role is implicit. These are the things of plays, the living, moving material culture of the Abbey canon. Each one earns its keep by contributing to the national narrative. This radio, for instance, is from the very first production of Brian Friel's Dancing at Lunasa in 1990. At the end of the Broadway run, the company made this plaque for it and presented it to Joe Vanek, who's a Prague man, but in recognition of his outstanding set design. And then Joe recognized that he needed to give it back to us, and so he donated it back to the Abbey. This is a terrible slide of the plough pram. This one has had the longest stage career of all. It made its debut in the original production of The Plough and the Stars in 1926. It appeared in each subsequent revival, survived the fire, was actually pulled out by a fireman. There are pictures that you can see online. We finally retired it in 1999. As a prop master, I wrestle with justifying the continued storage of props because there is never enough space. Along with obviously significant objects such as the pram, others are more subtle. They reflect obsolete societal norms and practices. My role has been compared to that of a social archivist. So we've got things like milk bottles, which were once common objects, which are no longer used. This Bible gives me a shiver every time I come across it. It hints at a culture that thankfully is receding into the past. This is just a tiny example of our ephemera. We've got tons and tons of this sort of thing. That hat box is from Menzies, which is no longer exists, a draper that doesn't exist anymore in Dublin. And the postcard was sent into our national broadcaster. It's an answer to a quiz. It's the sort of thing that now would just be done by text. And we have loads of them. This one may be recognized with some of the Irish contingent. Mr. Mercier, if you're there, I may have aged you with that slide. That's one of our selection of vinyl. And then this, some props are so battered and worn they seem logical choices for disposal, such as these enamel jugs. But on the other hand, they've achieved natural patina, which only adds to their value as communicators. We have a lot of vintage tins. And many of these have only survived because Stephen used to use them to hold smaller props such as coins or keys. One of my very favorite things in our prop stores are these. These are things written by actors when they're writing acting business. So they're doing accounts or whatever. That one says no more caffeine. This one, we find a lot of little drawings and doodles like this, notes from one actor to another. This one is an argument over a pen. Actors, am I right? This one is a little comment on the accounting profession. There's worse, there's way worse. These are the most intimate and human moments. They're captured forever like flies in amber in the prop store. The next one sees an actor expressing concerns I found familiar. Writing in an old ledger, she muses, "Is this genuine or a prop? It's hard to know." I don't know whether that's it. And then later she says, "I feel strange about writing in a book that may well be ... And she was correct because I took it to the archivist and she identified it as an Abbey accounts ledger from the 1930s. So she swiftly repossessed it before they could do any more damage to it. Lastly, there are somewhat naive props. These are examples of old prop making techniques and trends in design. This is a bizarrely confounding example, one of many, of these garishly overpainted ceramics that we have in our stores. It was presumably a design trend at one time. Or this hand-painted box. This one is, they're just sort of vague, free-handed interpretations of something that today would be done with Photoshop and printing. As is this, which is the insignia of the Irish police force. This would be done today with CAD, or there'd be laser cut or 3D, and there'd be hardly any human hand involved in the making of it. As a maker, I'm naturally drawn to these relics, although unusable as props I find them. I cannot bear to throw these away either, so maybe I am a hoarder. Today, my current tactic is to elevate the prop storage into more artful display. My hope is that others that will begin to see them as I do, not as problem to be solved or rubbish to be thrown out, but beautiful, intriguing objects that they are. This has been just a tiny glimpse into the Abbey prop store and was going to be the end of my presentation. I have 20 seconds left, until an intern found this in the prop store just last week. This is Bill Foley's Irish Actors Equity card, and that's Bill Foley, who is the man whose grease paint was found in the fire, on the night of the fire. So this is paid up until March of 1951, so clearly he thought it was lost in the fire, but it has been in our prop store all this time. That's it, thank you.
Fantastic. Eimer Murphy. Thank you very much, Eimer. Thank you very much for sticking off to time. And thank you very much for the insight into cupboards that hardly everyone sees. The next flash talk is Katarzhina Zakharova, who will be talking about performance and inclusion design as a source of implicating the audience. And you have some videos as well, don't you? Okay, wonderful. Katarzhina, over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, PQ. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm Katarzhina Zakharova, or Kata, an artist and the author of the project La Landing. So let's start with the teaser of the project, and then I'll share our team's experience. So the teaser, please.
Добрый день. Феникс 727 взлет произвел. По наборе 2000 футов. Разрешите левым по маршруту Dublin. Феникс 727, добрый день. Принимайте 2000 футов по давлению 1014. Левым по маршруту разрешаю. Зона 1, давление 5 до ложки.
That's it. So, video performance The Landing was made as a collaborative work of Katana Video Art and Performance Theatre and a clean grant-based media project, The Country of the Others. Children from 8 charity foundations participated in the project. The main aim of this art piece was to show the world of special children who have different diseases like oncology, cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome, and so on, avoiding dramatic perception. In order to achieve this goal, we decided to create a surrealistic reality as a conceptual metaphor. In order to we wanted to show a beautiful and multi-sided world of special children, and to give a different perception of such a definition as inclusion. For that reason, we decided to address an image of surreal landscapes and imaginary world instead of harsh reality of gloomy hospital halls and the cabinets of rehabilitation centers. We believe that the classic images from social commercials that the audience sees are often repulsive with their undisguised documentary and carry in indelible pessimistic image. Although the life of people with special needs is really filled with struggle, with difficulties, and is far from fairy tale, we still wanted to show the other side, more emotional, filled with curiosity, kindness, desire for life, and knowledge. The visual images of the performance, the landing, provide us a wide variety of interpretations, taking us into a world different from the ordinary. The project comprises 4 essential elements that helps us to create the magical world. These elements are locations, installations, costume design, and sound design. We used 5 different locations, 4 natural landscapes and 1 historical place. You may behold the paving stone in one of the scenes. Our producer Margarita Zakharova and project manager Irina Mobilova and I spent a lot of time trying to find inspiring locations and to get permissions to film there. From the very beginning, I started to call our locations the zones. Zone 1, Zone 2. That was a reminiscence of a famous film Stalker shot by Andrei Tarkovsky. Zone is a mysterious, deserted place, a sanctuary to some extent. Children and their parents were truly happy to visit our zones, and I was told later our filming process became a holiday for all of them, and the opportunity to meet each other, to gain new experience. Everyone felt comfortable. Actually, there was only one person who felt extremely uncomfortable, was nervous and very unhappy on set. It was me, because I was worried about weather conditions, the timing, and so on. The other essential part is installations, which are not just decorative elements denoting the scene of action, but they hold the main roles as performers. One of my favorite is a merry-go-round created for the wheelchairs. It consists of 8 beams, each beam leading to the chair. Our technical director, Timur Mukbilov, offered to install little lamps at the central part of the construction to make it look more festive. 8 men are rolling the chairs. All of them are musicians playing heavy music, like heavy metal, hardcore, metalcore. Then later, after the filming, they all said they were really impressed by interacting with the children and their parents were impressed too, of course. They were shocked, we can say. And the final interpretation of this image depends on the viewers. For example, I was told several times, I heard something like, oh, it's such a nice installation, it looks like a sun. But frankly speaking, I wanted to create a special merry-go-round for special children, because despite all the difficulties, they should have childhood. The floor lamp image embodies the warmth and coziness of home, where children return after surgeries and rehabilitation courses. Every child in the hospital or rehab center is dreaming about this moment of coming back. Glass painting was made by me and our art director and me. It was very interesting to observe the contrast between the cozy floor lamp and the nature. Children and state reserve inspectors were impressed too, especially inspectors. They were worried. Costume design is the third element. The most challenging goal was to make costumes eccentric, but at the same time safe and comfortable for the children. After the filming, all the costumes became the presents for the little performers, and that made them really happy. Through costume design, we wanted to give the audience abundant metaphoric hints, like little glasses for the mosaic of associations. The fourth and the last element of the landing is sound design. When I called our composer, Andrei A.K. Redelgeist, and told him we need techno music, he became very silent and and asked, you need techno for that video with special children. But then it became evidential that this kind of music will be helpful in avoiding dramatic perception and creating a special atmosphere. The viewers also hear the pilots and the pilots and dispatchers' voices. Both of them are not actors, but real pilots. The pilot is our guide to the surrealistic world. During pre-production, filming, and post-production, the landing became an opportunity for people from different spheres to interact with special children. This project is our attempt to use the potential of performing arts to create a comfortable and friendly environment for inclusivity. And I hope we achieve this purpose. Thank you.
Katarzhina Zakharova. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katarzhina. Our next flash talk, the speaker of the next flash talk is Maria Monseny in Triquell, talking about universal design across the stage design process. Okay, Maria, over to you.
Hello, so following to my colleague's practice, I am a white, tall, young girl with curly brown hair. And I'm going to speak about what is the role of the scenographer in universal access to culture. I'm not going to improvise, I'm going to read, okay? So, so I am Maria, I am a Catalan designer and cultural manager. I'm living on the countryside in a rural area, and I work as accessibility technician, as scenographer for theater and for events, and I generate cultural projects on my living area in Catalonia. So the thing is, what is universal access to culture? Many of you already know it, I guess. So it's the right every human has to be a cultural agent in a passive or an active way, even as a creator or as a consumer. And it's also the right every person has to be represented culturally. There's data that says that the 50% of the global population has a disability, and there's other data that says that 80% of people on the world will have a disability on a moment of its life. I'm asking myself what happens with people with disabilities with their access to culture. And most of times, theaters and venues are adapted. So some people with some disabilities can go to the events. But the thing is, what happens with the event, not with the artwork? If artworks are not prepared, this is what happens, is that people with disability cannot access to scenic space, cannot see properly some of the facts that happen. They cannot concentrate maybe because of their disability. they cannot be dressed or with complicated costumes or be undressed by themselves, or they cannot perceive the silence or hear the sound field or all of this. So this ends on people with disability not being on stage, not being among the public, not being represented, their experience not being represented, and because they cannot receive the whole art experience that we are trying to offer. So they are losing opportunities, and the other people is also losing opportunities and richness, and mainly it's because of the design, so our work. So what can we do? So using universal design as a strategy to design our stage or props or costumes, etc. So universal design is the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of the age, size, ability, or disability. And now I'm going to show you 3 examples that are not classical, one of them it is, but to see how we can add information for people that maybe don't perceive some of the parts of a work. So this was a prop, an apple macaroon filled with a coulis, which was earthy and salty. And the apple macaroon was sweet, the green part. And then it was a prop to give to the people before the work of Wilhelm Tell. I don't know if you know the story. It was an arrow and a kid and a dot. Yeah. So that prop was given before was supposed to be given before the work, and it gives to everybody the sense of an emotion, an extra emotion with another sense about what's going to happen or what's the whole meaning of the story. Okay, so introducing multisensory elements to the context that are designed following the same strategy as the rest of the stage design. That's a strategy. Then she was Paul Sim. She is Paul Sim. She is a character on Balaguer, which is my city. She is a magical character that comes into the Christmas party, in the Christmas events, and she carries with her the magic of that time. So she speaks, she communicates with sign language, and we can hear her thoughts, because an interpret cannot speak orally and speak with the hands, because there are 2 different languages. So she explains to kids what's going to happen, but she also speaks by herself, and she interprets other characters. And she also interprets children who want to speak with other characters. So that's important to introduce sign language from the beginning of the character creation, so it's a main element. And then for us, it involves creating or designing according to its benefits and convenience. So in this case, it was the transparent mask because of the COVID at the time, or generating contrast with hands and at the top, or lighting it properly, or situating her in front of kids or people on the stage. And this is the more common one, which is a scale model that's touchable. We can see it on the Japanese stage. I don't know if you've seen it. And it's important to remember that people can have rest of sight. We sometimes speak about blind people, but it's not just blind people who have a disability, but there's people that they cannot make a difference between colors, or that they have other problems on visual on the sight. So that's really important, and that's really a job we have to do, to offer scale models or audio description of what's happening on the stage, which is a €0 strategy. So what can we do as scenographers for making politics through our work? So first of all, thinking about people with disabilities, or if it's easier for us, maybe thinking about elders or children when creating a scenic context. The second one is learning about disabilities, because there's thousands of situations, and how to suppress barriers across universal design strategies. Then here I've written some strategies that can be applied to works, and maybe, well, if you want to read. And then proposing creative and accessible solutions to our colleagues that are not the scenographers, so the directors or the actors or the people that buys our products. And yeah, just to finish, I wanted to say that it's important that when we speak about accessibility, we apply one strategy for one kind of disability, we don't say that this work is accessible. We have to say that it's accessible for the blind or for the hearing impaired or for because if not, people frustrate and we lose public. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much, Maria, for a wonderful talk. I would like now to invite Michael Smalley to talk about distributed cognition and scenography. Michael, you have been here already on PQ Talks 4 years ago. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pavel. Yes, I'm Michael. 4 years ago, I was here, well, not here, at PQ, talking about stage management and scenography. And as part of my research for that book, and I promise this is not an 8-minute plug of a book that's coming out, one of the key findings was me understanding this field called distributed cognition, which has been instrumental in my research, but I think it applies much more broadly than just to stage managers. So I wanted to share some of it with you. If I can make the clicker work. No, I can break the clicker. There we go. So yeah, very briefly, I wanted to talk about what distributed cognition is, some of the key principles that I think we can use as scenographers, a little bit about its role in stage management, and how it can be used as a collaborative tool for other scenographers, and importantly, not just in our practice and in our working practices, but I think the more that we know about distributed cognition and the more that conscious we are of our use of it, the better we can create the experiences that we want to create for our audiences as part of relational semiotics. And I've got a few references there if you want to learn more, because 10 minutes is not enough to introduce you to a whole field of study. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So what is distributed cognition? Well, the reason why I fell in love with it is because it has at its heart interdisciplinarity, and I think that as theatre makers it's something that we can all respond to. So it takes in a wide range of perspectives from these kinds of people. And what they all share is a belief and a conviction and an interest in the fact that cognition, thinking, doesn't just happen within an individual's brain. They believe that cognition is unevenly distributed across social, technological and biological realms. And for us, the social is kind of important. And by that, I don't just mean the interactions that we have with each other as people, but I also mean the spaces that we create, importantly, for those interactions to take place. So when I introduce distributed cognition to my students, I talk about it being a way of making the space doing the thinking work for us. And the fact that it is distributed across this social dimension means that we instinctively do most of the things that I'm going to share with you anyway. So there is value in doing the things the way that we've always done them. That shouldn't be the only reason why we continue doing them. Of course, we should question it. But if it's something that we know works, why would we reinvent the wheel? And that's foundational to distributed cognition. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key principles that I think apply to our practice as theatre makers. And the key one is cognitive thrift. And that just basically means that the more that we can offload the thinking work to the spaces around us and to the tools that we produce, the paperwork, etc., then the more brain space we've got left to concentrate on the stuff that we actually need to work on. So the more we can make something routine, then the better positioned we are to apply the thinking to the bits that need more thinking work. Yeah. One of the ways that we do that is by managing the use of space so that it does the thinking for us, so that it can simplify choices that the people using that space makes. It can simplify the perception of various aspects of the space. And using distributed cognition principles, you can also simplify the internal computational load for how to navigate that space. If we do all of that appropriately, our ultimate goal is to create what we call smart spaces, which, as the quote there says, are centres of coordination, which can be characterised in terms of the people using it having an ongoing orientation to problems of space and time. So not just how to use it now, but what the potentialities for that space are, and making sure that we know, as users of that space, what shifts are possible within it. Next slide, please. So applying these key principles in stage management is a key objective for stage management. In fact, the interviews that I conducted with stage managers, when I shared the knowledge of distributed cognition with them, they said, "Oh, wow! I'm delighted that this is a field and it has a term." And some of the others said, "Well, that isn't just a key aspect of what we do; it is our entire job. That is what stage managers do." As Triquell would say, a large part of what stage management is about is the creation of cognitive artifacts, tools, paperwork, rehearsal reports that do the thinking and spread the thinking, do the work of distributing the thinking. And I just wanted to share that because the more that stage managers realise that that's what they're doing and that's one of the purposes of their work, then the better we as stage managers are get at that job, and the more you as other scenographers can rely on us. So if we have this shared knowledge that that's part of our job, then I think that aids collaboration. Similarly, next slide, please. For other scenographers, I think it applies in all of our work, really. I'm also a lighting designer. And so when I create a lighting plan, if I have the principles of cognitive thrift and distributed cognition in mind as a purpose to evaluate consciously whether or not that's a good lighting plan, whether or not that tells the lighting team exactly what they need to know so that I don't have to be in the room when the rig goes up, then that makes me do the lighting design better, rather than just doing it the way that I've been trained to do it. So I think understanding these principles and consciously using them in our work can enhance communication within and across departments. And importantly and significantly, the most interesting bit of it for me is on the next slide, please, where it can also help us create better experiences, more richer experiences for our audiences. Just like we want to be able to concentrate our working and our thinking on the bits that matter, if we do this for our audiences, then we can make sure that they're attending to the bits of the experiences that are the most meaningful for them. And one of the ways that we can do this is by using principles of distributed cognition to create patterns within the experience. And 3 of the key patterns that I talk about and shared briefly 4 years ago are called concordance, dissonance, and topology. And topology is really about the relationships between space and time. So a lot of distributed cognition work applies to that dimension more. And it just helps us manipulate and orchestrate the performance environment in a way that creates a smart space for not just us as theatre makers, but also our audiences, so that we help them have an ongoing orientation in terms of the space and time. So if you want, that's a very brief overview of a huge field of work, but I'm seeing the countdown and I'm running out of time. So if we go to the last slide, these are some key thinkers and workers, apart from me, I've just got a plug for my book in there, but the other people in there are key thinkers and workers in the fields of distributed cognition. My entry into it was Triquell's work down the bottom there, and she applies it to a theatre context, which is what got me interested in the first place. So if you're looking for a place to start and to learn more, I'd suggest starting with hers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much, Michael, for your talk. And the final flash talk of our first panel is Silje Kise, The Art of Seeing, a Visual and Sensory Performance for Deaf, Hearing Impaired and Hearing Audiences. Silje, over to you.
Just show me what to click. Okay, hello. Nice to see you all. I'm Silje Kise, and I'm about to talk about The Art of Seeing, Kunsten å se, a performance I made with Thea Skallevold, who runs the Stille Teatret, the silent theatre in Norway. We had a premiere in 2022, but it's been a long process since 2017. I made this project together with a team of Norwegian artists, among them Mari Hesjedal, text, Erik Hedin, sound design, and Oskar Udby, light design and video design. And Håvard Kalseth and Per Vidar Anfinsen was the performers. This was an independent production, but we had co-producers Bergen International Festival and Teater Manu, which is a Norwegian sign language theatre. We were also very happy to be funded by many funding parties. So who am I? I did not know that this would be so big. I'm Silje Kise, a Norwegian scenographer, costume designer, and performance maker. I'm a white female with short brown hair, and also in this picture I have a very big eye. I'm also working with eco-scenography, and I try to implicate this as a work process in this project, but I will not talk about that today, but I will be a part of the panel of Eco-Scenography Day tomorrow if somebody is interested in that. So, this is some examples from our research process where we wanted to create a performance about the theme vision, the evolution of the eye and the sight. What does it mean to be seen? What does it mean to see? How did the eye evolve? And what will happen if we stop seeing each other in the eye? We had a goal, and that was to create a shared experience for the audience, a unique spatial and sensory experience that they could share with each other in the moment, and not depending if they were deaf, hearing impaired, or hearing. If the first language is Norwegian Sign Language or Norwegian spoken language. So, here you see one of our 2 performers. This is dancer and sign language performer Håvard Kalseth. We worked originally with a deaf dancer. Working with her made a huge impact and was really important in creating our work process. Unfortunately, due to illness, she had to withdraw from the project when we were over halfway through our rehearsal process. Luckily, Håvard was one of our 2 sign language interpreters, and he had been following the whole process. He's also a professional dancer. So we were very lucky. We tried to find a deaf professional performer, but it was impossible within such short notice. This project was already very delayed because of the pandemic, so we had to keep our deadline. I have been trying to learn sign language during this process. I have started to. It's been very exciting and very interesting. I have just had a little glimpse into this language, which is so different from my language, which is Norwegian. And I'm very aware that this project is made by hearing artists. So this flash talk is held in deep respect, knowing that I am an outsider to the deaf community. We have been working very closely with a sign language consultant called Silje Zakharova, and she has contributed with her insights and so valuable views on how to shape and work with sign language as a scenic language. The visual aspects of sign language made me very interested. Sign language are expressed through manual articulation in combination with non-manual markers, such as postures or movements of the body, head, eyebrows, eyes, cheeks, and mouth. And I was wondering, how could we work with sign language as a formal tool, and how would that construct how we would work with text, with movement, with visuals, and so on. Due to the need for everyone to see the face and the hands of the people performing in sign language, sometimes sign language theater could have a tendency to be coming quite frontal. And we wanted to explore this aspect and try to challenge this by placing the performers in a differently shaped room. Here you can see our two performers, Håvard and Per Vidar Anfinsen. During our research phase, we read and explored many aspects of our theme, the eye. And we wanted to make a performance space a circular half dome. We wanted to place the audience inside their own eye. And we wanted to make it an intimate space, a safe space, where the audience could look each other in the eye while experiencing the performance. We also wanted to create a 360 degrees video using the whole tent surface as a screen. And by that, in that way, immerse the audience in visual material. But we didn't want to drown the performance in it. We wanted to blend it with analog shadows and reflections and make the performers control and manipulate the room. A part of my work in this project was to create the tent. It had to be at least 7 meters in diameter, and it had to be very easy to rig down and up because we were touring this production. I was very nervous on how to do this, but I got Oddvar Nilsen at the Norwegian National Theatre, Norwegian Opera, to construct it. And it was built by employees at the workshop at the opera. So we were very happy when we rigged it the first time and we saw this beautiful room where the walls are kind of like slightly moving because of the way the textile works. Here are some photos from our devising process, where we experimented with lens and prisms and to see how the light could change and how we could create organic shapes and a visual exploration of the historical evolution of sight. We began with the Big Bang, the life in water billions of years ago, and the evolution of sight, the trilobites and so on. Our light and video designer, Oskar Udby, was very crucial in this process, and he was creating the video material live as we were making this performance together. So here you see some of the pictures from our experimenting, which was really fun and interesting. We also wanted to work very conscious with other senses. This is our sound designer, Erik Hedin, who is specializing in sound design for deaf. And he's working with vibrations. And I had a vision of using vibration design as our sound design for all the audience to feel very close to their body. So I found these haptic vests, transducers called Subpacks, but there are also other brands. And together with Erik, we worked very closely and he designed the whole sound composition as a vibration and sound composition. So we placed the audience in 2 half circles inside a tent, and on each chair there was a sub-pack, and they could themselves adjust how hard they will lead against the back, depending on how intense they wanted the vibrations to be. So here you see some photos from our performance. We also worked a lot with the actors and eye contact, and them making eye contact with everyone in the audience and exploring what that would lead to in all the different meetings with different audiences in all the different performances. There was, of course, a lot of challenges in this work as well. By the way, here you see how we tried to make a jellyfish by using a flashlight and a magnifying glass. Because we decided to place the audience in a circle, we had to work very consciously in how we placed the performers. So we had one performing space in the middle of the circle, and then we also had 2 performer spaces in each opposite side of the tent, because everyone had at all times to be able to see the face and the hands of the person performing in sign language, and they had to see the lips and the face of the person performing in spoken language. And also because we were working with deaf, hearing, and hearing impaired audiences, we could not, for example, use we couldn't use the technique of voiceover, because that would leave out the people who could not understand sign language and when they couldn't read lips. So this was a challenge that we were very aware of, and we wanted to work with and to see how that would create a unique language and a unique way of shaping the performance. And in the end, I think that we managed to create a unique spatial, visually, and sensory experience. We got a lot of positive feedback, both from the deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing audiences. And we hope to tour this production at a later point and maybe also translate it for an international setting. And then maybe I could just run the very, very short video teaser at the end. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Silje. I would now like to ask all these speakers to come to the podium. Okay, so we've heard 6 flash talks by Dan and Belle, then Eimer, Katarzhina, Maria, Michael, and Silje. And we have time for questions. And there are also 2 people with microphones, I believe. So please just raise your hands if you have any questions for any of our speakers. Sorry, any of our speakers, and they will run up to you to give you the microphone. It always takes some time before the first question comes, and then there is no stopping. It's always like that. Oh yeah. Thank you very much. So there is a hand here.
Hello, thank you everybody. It was really impactful. I do a lot of research in accessibility, so I really loved it. I was just asked, this is for Maria, I was just wondering, have you found any way to be like holistically accessible in design, meaning that anybody of any experience level can experience it? Because that's kind of where I'm struggling right now in my artistic practice. And
Yeah, I was thinking, I was speaking with her before and about this, and I think that it's a really complex matter, but maybe we don't have to focus on translating the information that we receive from different senses or so what we have to choose is if we want to give an aesthetic experience, our intellectual experience, a political idea. So when choosing this, then we can develop strategies for reaching our goal on this sense. I think it's not about thinking of translating everything for a deaf impaired or for someone that maybe sees but not as everyone else, or I don't know if it's clear.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question. Thank you very much, Maria, for the answer. Any more questions? Oh yes, there is a question here in the first row.
I'm kind of jumping off the previous question to you. When thinking about, we've talked about like the question previously was universal experience, universal accessibility. And I think that that is an interesting goal and quite a complex problem because there are some that are incompatible with each other. Do you ever think about instead what is the single experience of different disabilities bringing to a piece, instead of like, no matter what you do, a person of a disability is going to experience it differently. And instead of thinking about it as like bringing experience up, and we saw that a little bit in the examples of the pieces that we were talking about, but can you give some examples of ways that designers can think about equitable, unique experiences from different disabilities instead of trying to create a quality of experience and equitable experience? For either.
Yeah, that I think that to go to the root of the idea you say, I think that people with disabilities, they have a singular experience of everything they assume. So that's so our work as scenographers could be to see how they can live this experience that we can offer and translate it for people that cannot live it the same way. I think that's the only way we can work on giving value to that kind of experience,
Can I maybe see if I answer what you asked about, but in our project we were originally thinking about making it for deaf audiences and for blind audiences, and we were really trying to figure out how to do it, but in the end we decided that we wanted to focus on a group, or like different groups actually, because we wanted to include both deaf and hearing impaired and hearing audiences, because it felt like it would be really complicated to try to think about all different aspects. And if we were to work very visually and very with sound, we were worried that we would have to sort of apply a lot of layers all the time, because we were afraid that people would feel left out. Like if we were working very much with visual imagery and no sound for a longer period of time, that would leave out the people who were not able to see it, and vice versa. So we decided to focus on less groups to be able to work more cohesive with that, and then we wanted to challenge ourselves to work with the other groups in the next project and then maybe merge it in the end. But it was, for me, it felt really hard to try to make it accessible for all groups at the same time in this specific project. Also because we didn't want to interpret, we wanted to make the sign language as an artistic expression. So I was thinking about when you talked about how would you say, when you interpret what's happening on stage for people who can't see it with sound?
Voiceover?
Audio description, yeah. Then it's a description, right? And if you have a sign language interpreter on the side of the stage, then it's an interpretation, but it's not like an integral part of the artistic expression.
It's like, yeah, and sometimes, I don't know if you think about it, but what happens is that people that cannot see maybe cannot hear. So that intersection of disabilities, it's sometimes that makes things even more complex, no? And maybe you are leaving behind someone that cannot hear, but because they cannot see as well, no? And it's yeah, it's never enough, never, no? Yeah.
I wonder if we could ask other speakers if they would like to respond to that bit, because there are topics of inclusion and access and exploring other sensory ways. So I wonder if other of our speakers would like to respond to the question and to the discussion.
Hello? Yes. Yeah, I think we often are asked as well, very often, how can we make all work sensory, and how can we integrate access typically for audiences labeled with profound and multiple learning disabilities, but into other theatre productions who aren't necessarily for people with PMLD, when actually we're trying to create niche audiences and niche theatre for these audiences. And actually, the reason we make sensory theatre productions is because our audiences access the world on a sensory level, and that's niche and specific for them. And I think it's almost the right thing to do, to not categorize, but to create work specifically for audiences who have different needs and different ways of accessing the world, because we can serve them better that way, and we can specialize better in that way, and we can create work that is supportive of their needs rather than trying to make everything accessible for everyone at all times. I think that's a wonderful world to think about and to dream of, but actually sometimes that could be a detriment to our audience, and specifically our audience. I can't speak for all audiences, but I think I, for one, definitely wouldn't want to cram in hundreds of people with lots of different needs into our shows, because we always keep our audiences very small for many, many different reasons. But I also certainly wouldn't feel comfortable going to a large theatre company who make work for huge audiences and say, make all this work sensory, make all this work, suitable for our audience, because actually it doesn't necessarily make it accessible for all audiences. It just makes it, accessible for us, our own audiences. Did you want to touch on that? Are you?
Yeah, so this is probably more about like the actual shows, and even though we work in like a really niche field within sensory theatre and within essentially immersive theatre, is that not all the sensory moments are engaging for every audience member that comes along. We try and, evolve enough variety in there. And also, like, even within our, niche audiences, there are still conflicting access barriers there. So I suppose it's creating a space where there's the potential and possibility to alter things as well, that's right for that audience member, whether that is like an actor facilitating a particular sensory moment for that audience member and communicating with the carer, or like, you know, taking kind of signals off of that audience member, or whether it's actually like the whole show and the content of the show, and giving a wide variety on different themes that don't have to be downplayed, actually. I think something that, you know, is often kind of overlooked is that, you know, accessible theatre can be big, bold, beautiful, and it's just altered. It doesn't mean like, I suppose like, I don't know what word, I'm struggling to think of the word. Yeah.
Sorry. I have a quote which I hope will anger everyone else in this room, because it angered me. About 2 years ago, I read an article, and it was appalling, and it was someone saying that inclusive theatre, specifically inclusive theatre for our audiences with profound and multiple learning disabilities, is watered down theatre and more tame and kind of basic version of theatre. And ever since, I constantly say to Belle, right, we need to be groundbreaking, we need to change the game, we need to reinvent the wheel, because I refuse for this to be the really, really basic version of theatre, to make it accessible. No, it can be just as cutting edge, it can be just as stunning and beautiful, but just for a different audience. Why don't they deserve that? They do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I got a bit passionate there, sorry.
I wonder, Katarzhina. Okay. There are several hands up. There is. Okay. The first is the person with white, yellow, blonde hair with a camera in their hand. Okay. Yeah. If you could raise your hand again.
I haven't got a camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Right. Do prop masters dream of renting, buying, building extra storage space? Or is that the start of a slippery slope?
Yes, it's the start of a slippery slope. Hi, yeah, it is the start of a slippery slope, but it's the answer to the immediate panicked problem, which is, okay, so what I didn't have time to say is in the Abbey, when Stephen was building the collection, there was one prop store in the Abbey building that they built to replace the one that was burned down in '51, and it's a tiny little cupboard. And so he took over any other space that was available, which were not accessible, most of them, and we are continually having to empty them because of the dangerous access is one of them. That's like a loft that we have to climb up. So every time that we have to reduce some of the stuff, I personally, because I'm aware of the level of important ephemera and things that are in there, have a small panic attack every single time. So to take away that pressure, yes, you dream that it would just be, that's what I actually said, if you go to see the Irish pavilion over in the other building, that was one of my dreams, was an ever-expanding magical space that takes away that pressure. But then it would just take over the world. So that's not really an answer either. But I don't know what the answers are. If anyone does, come and see me afterwards.
Thank you very much. There are more questions. So there's a hand up here.
So this is just kind of a callback to the your question, and the discussion that resulted. And I'm really curious to hear, to me, theater is a field that often gets caught up in norms and ideas of what constitutes professional practice, and what is the good way to make a performance. And I'm curious to hear not just about like, oh no, let's make inclusive theater that is also groundbreaking, but what are ways that you have either been challenged by the communities that you're seeking to serve, or that you have found in specifically seeking to serve those communities, that you have developed forms that transcend that particular intention to be inclusive. That there seems to be tremendous capacity to inform, quote unquote, normative theater about innovation that also serves these quote unquote niche communities. That there's tremendous potential for accessibility to drive innovative forms rather than get to have innovative forms. So I'd love to hear anybody who's on stage speak on that.
Thank you very much for the question. Who would like to?
I guess I'll start in that I think there is integration is really key. Like in the way of, for example, when directing an actor on stage, you kind of go from this point, especially when with like non-verbal audiences, what is like the most necessary thing that we can show? What brings this really to life without words? And actually, like, just through that play and experimenting like in that way, so many things kind of pop up that you just didn't even think of, or someone suggests something and then all of a sudden you're kind of just down this I think it's a really beautiful way to work because it actually is so freeing. And then you kind of get this narrative and story that's devised, and then you're like, well, what would that like feel like? What would that smell like? What would that sound like? And you kind of just keep building the layers from there. And I guess it's everyone has their own process, but I guess like it just starts with like integration and just from like the simplest place, and the how can we find a way to communicate this like universally, and then go from there, and then you can add more meaning and context onto that in whatever way you kind of see fit. I hope that kind of answers somewhat of the question. If anyone else wants to add.
Silje?
For us as artists, it was a curiosity because we wanted to see what this way of working could add to our artistic exploration of the theme. And it was eye-opening all the time because we always had to think differently. In the process, we met all these different questions that we had never thought of, and we had to turn things upside down and work in a different way and create things that we would never have imagined to create. So it had a huge impact on our work process, which I am taking with me to other projects, and I'm also working with other projects with sign language as well. And also for us, because this was such an intimate space with the tent, there was room for 30 people in the audience. The performances where there was a mixed group of audience, where you had both deaf and hearing impaired audiences together, that was the most emotionally rich performances, because you could feel the atmosphere. You could also see the way the other members of the audience reacted to what was happening, and you sort of got energy as an audience member looking and experiencing how other people were experiencing things. So that was such an enriching experience, and when we had just hearing-abled audiences, for example, it had a completely different atmosphere.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to respond? Or maybe there's a... Sorry, Marie? Dan.
I feel like this isn't the answer to your question, but your question inspired an answer that I would like to give. I also feel like every answer I'm going to give is just angry. I'm not an angry person, I promise. But let's get angry for a second. So obviously, I think you spoke a little bit about pushback from different communities in trying to create groundbreaking work, and particularly for this audience. And I think, I don't know if Belle will agree, the majority of the pushback that we get for our work is from venues. We tour multiple times per year to multiple venues. And the first thing I hear when I approach venues, large state-funded venues, I'll add, are, we already have work for autistic audiences. That's not who we make work for. They are welcome to come, but that's not specifically the audiences that we make work for. We also, there's one or two other sensory theatre companies in the country. They'll say, oh, we already have them coming this year, so that's kind of our quota filled. I think I don't have to explain that's why that's wrong. Others are, we don't have the budget, but then they have 3 Shakespeare productions in one season. We love a bit of the Shakespeare, but one per year for our audience and 3 Shakespeare productions per season. I don't have to explain why that's wrong. And others are, oh, I have received emails constantly saying, oh, can we put you into this side room instead? Or we're not going to include you in the brochure this time, or we don't need to have you on the website, it's fine. It's like, no, actually, This is a theatre show touring the country for an audience the same as any other theatre production, and you would be shocked if I told you the names of these theatres, very large, very well-funded theatres, who I've had appalling conversations with, appalling. And it's because to them, sensory theatre, particularly for audiences who are profoundly learning disabled, it's not important. It's not part of their priority list. And granted, they have loads of other things to do. They have loads of other deadlines to meet, targets to meet, sure. But if we're not making work for audiences who physically can't access theatre, then what are we doing? When the production that we spoke about here today toured last year, 92% of audiences had never stepped foot in a theatre before. 92%. Can you see why I'm angry?
Okay, we have time for perhaps one more question. Yeah, wonderful. There is a hand up here. Yes, you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Rina Ernstein. I'm a costume designer, and I was actually going to ask about stocks for costumes, props, and and scenery. I was wondering if you think that there might be more to the idea of a museum out of a stock, and perhaps there's a purpose for how we as a group want to be seen more in the work we do behind the scenes, and perhaps museum is part of that as we continue with the process of making stocks more accessible and easier to expand. Also maybe making them public.
Yes, it's one of my dreams again. I actually approached the National Museum of Ireland about this, and they're kind of very interested in it, but they're talking about doing a pop-up or potentially temporary exhibit. But one of the things that happens regularly with the Abbey, because it's an old institution, it was founded in 1904, is that the word, it's a museum, is used against us as an insult. So the idea of creating a museum out of our things is a little bit, it's outside of our remit, because we're supposed to be creating live theatre. But the archivist, Maria Delaney, who works with me, she and I dream regularly about using, because there's going to be a new building built, because the building that we are in, which is built in '66, is on its last legs. And so there's discussions going on about a little space. But while I was talking about this with the head of the Irish National Museum, she was talking about, I think it's a Dutch model, or it's a European model anyway, where they have all of the national cultural institutions share a storage space that is storage and for storage, but yet is accessible to the public and is sort of more vibrant and alive, and not just storage, not just shelves and shelves of things sitting there, but it is things that will move and use, and people can come in and do workshops and things. And it's kind of a new idea. So there's a little bit of discussion at the moment going on about that. So
thank you very much. We have hit 4 o'clock, and I would like to acknowledge the wonderful presentations from all 6 or 7 speakers from our flash talks. There were wonderful connections. I'm afraid that we could discuss. I encourage that we continue the discussion outside, but please join me in a round of applause for our wonderful speakers. Thank you.